Termina and Hyrule, nearby lands or parallel worlds. Let's jump straight into it.
In this video, we will explore two things. First, we will see if Termina and Hyrule are parallel worlds or nearby lands. Second, we will explore whether the inhabitants of Termina are aware of their counterparts in Hyrule. Before going into those, a little background on both Hyrule and Termina. The Kingdom of Hyrule, which is a land rich in beauty, contains within it Hyrule Castle, which is located in Hyrule Field. From Hyrule Field to the northeast lies Death Mountain, to the east is the Kokiri Forest, to the south is Lake Hylia, and to the west is Gerudo Desert. We know that Hyrule was created by the three goddesses during a time of chaos. Then the goddess of power created the land, Nehru, the goddess of wisdom, created order, and Furor, the goddess of courage, created the diverse inhabitants. Upon leaving the world, the goddesses left behind the Triforce, the three sacred golden triangles, which was at first guarded by Hylia herself, and then eventually left to rest in the sacred realm.
Termina, on the other hand, was created by the four giants, and not coincidentally, is dominated by four regions. To the south is the swampland of Woodfall, to the north are the mountains of Snowhead, to the west is the ocean of Great Bay, and to the east is the kingdom of Icona, which is in ruins. As we are told by Andrew's grandmother, the four giants are the gods of the four worlds. However, in the past, the people were not separated into the four regions like they are now, as all the people lived together and the four giants lived among them. In fact, we know that at one time, Termina used to be peaceful.
With that introduction out of the way, let's explore the relationship between Hyrule and Termina. The original Majora's Mask instruction manual states that Termina is a mysterious place and is a kind of parallel world that is similar to and yet different from the land of Hyrule, and that the people Link meets here may look vaguely familiar at first glance. The official Nintendo Player's Guide for Majora's Mask states that Termina is a world parallel to Hyrule, and a world where everyone is a stranger, yet each looks like the twin of someone Link has met in his homeworld of Hyrule. Finally, Hyrule Historia states that Termina is a strange parallel world where many of the inhabitants look identical to the people of Hyrule. Despite the slight variations of the phrases, based on the fact that all three sources do contain the phrase parallel world, and the fact that all three sources note that the people Link meets may look familiar at first glance but are indeed different people, it is reasonable to conclude that Termina is some kind of a parallel world to Hyrule.
Putting more confusion into the mix, Mr. Aonuma, the Legend of Zelda series producer, has described Termina as a nearby land to Hyrule, and he's also said that in feel, it's almost like another dimension. Mr. Aonuma also stated that even though these characters have a similar appearance to the version of them that appeared in Ocarina, they express something different in a different world. But how do we reconcile all of this? Is Termina located in a nearby land to Hyrule, or is Termina a parallel world to Hyrule? Is it possible that Termina lies in another dimension? Let's take a closer look.
Mr. Aonuma's precise statement about Termina was that it was in a nearby land, but that in feel it's almost like another dimension. Thus, he was not suggesting that Termina is in fact in another dimension, but rather that it feels as if it's almost like another dimension. Moreover, Mr. Aonuma's description that Termina is in a nearby land probably alludes to the fact that Termina can be accessed by a portal through the Hyrulean Lost Woods, as was covered in great detail in our previous Zelda theory. Thus, Termina is not just a figment of Link's imagination, rather, it is a whole new parallel world, with its inhabitants being alternate versions of the people of Hyrule. Now, as we just covered, all of the sources describe Termina as some type of a parallel world to Hyrule. But what exactly does the phrase parallel world mean? A parallel world is defined as a reality or world that exists simultaneously with ours, but independent of it. The phrase parallel universe, which is sometimes used interchangeably with the phrase parallel world, is defined to be a universe that exists separately alongside another universe. Another source defines parallel universe as a theory of self-contained, separate reality coexisting with one's own. Accordingly, Termina is a different, self-contained world that coexists with Hyrule.
Now that we know that Termina is some type of parallel world to Hyrule, and given the fact that we know from earlier that Termina's inhabitants appear to visually look identical to the people of Hyrule, the next logical question is whether the people of Termina are in fact the same as the ones in Hyrule. Especially given the fact that among others, the Skull Kid and the Happy Mask Salesman appear to be the same characters in both games, not just visually. We can conclude that with a few exceptions, Termina's inhabitants are not the same as those in Hyrule. We already know from the official Nintendo's player guides for Majora's Mask and Mr. Aonuma himself that despite their visual similarities, people in Termina are different than the people of Hyrule. However, the biggest support for the position that the characters in Termina are in fact different, despite looking identical to their Hyrulean counterparts, comes from the in-game story and text. Clearly, we know that other than a few exceptions, like Skull Kid and Happy Mask Salesman, whom we will cover shortly, all the characters from Ocarina of Time that appear in Majora's Mask, despite their similar appearance, are in fact different people. For example, Kaomi and Katake are witches who together comprise the Spirit Temple's boss Twin Rova in Ocarina of Time. Whereas these same characters in Majora's Mask, despite looking identical to their counterparts in Hyrule, play completely different roles there, with Kaomi running the potion shop and Katake running the tours in the swamp. There are many other examples, of course.
Unlike these characters such as the Happy Mask Salesman and Skull Kid are the exact same person in both games, not just visually, but in actuality. This may appear to contradict the fact that Termina is thus a parallel world, but we will cover that as well. First, let's take a look at the Happy Mask Salesman. In Ocarina of Time, we know the Happy Mask Salesman owned the Happy Mask shop in Hyrule Market, where he tells us that he deals with masks that bring happiness to everyone, and that after Link has sold all the masks, he will become happy himself. Finally, he tells Link that somewhere in the world, someone is waiting for these masks, and tells Link to have faith. In Majora's Mask, the Happy Mask Salesman tells us that he owns the Happy Mask shop, which appears to be a reference to the Happy Mask shop in Hyrule Market in Ocarina of Time, and that he travels far and wide in search of masks. He also tells us that during his travels, a very important mask was stolen from him by an imp in the woods, likely in the same Hyrulean Lost Woods that Link was traversing when he wound up in Termina, because we're told that he, the Happy Mask Salesman, was following us. It's very likely that after losing the Majora's Mask, the Happy Mask Salesman followed Link and observed the Skull Kid's ambush of Link and theft of Link's ocarina, which is probably why the Happy Mask Salesman knew that the item that was stolen from Link was the ocarina. In the end credits of Majora's Mask, right before the Happy Mask Salesman disappears, he says that Link sure has managed to make quite a number of people happy, telling Link further that the masks he has are full of happiness. Based on all of this, it would be very difficult to argue that the Happy Mask Salesman from Majora's Mask is a different version than the one in Ocarina of Time, given that 1. The Happy Mask Salesman in Majora's Mask tells Link that he owns the Happy Mask shop in Hyrule and that he's a traveling salesman. 2. That he was presumably traveling the same route as Link to get to Termina from Hyrule. We can see this from the fact that he was in the Lost Woods when the imp stole the Majora's Mask. And 3. That he alludes to masks making people happy and bringing happiness in both games. It is reasonable to conclude that the Happy Mask Salesman from Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time are indeed the same person. Of course, this doesn't negate the fact that Termina is still a parallel world to Hyrule, as it's very possible that some of the characters, including Link and the Happy Mask Salesman, were able to traverse from Hyrule to Termina using some sort of a portal, something we covered in a prior Zelda theory. Moving on is the Skull Kid from Majora's Mask, the same Skull Kid that we met in Ocarina of Time and taught Soraya's song to. All the evidence leads us to conclude that they are indeed the same Skull Kids. When we look at the opening sequence of Majora's Mask, after the fairies ambush Epona and Link falls off of Epona, the Skull Kid approaches Link and upon closer inspection asks, "Huh? This guy?" That statement appears to imply that the Skull Kid had previously seen Link, as why else would he refer to Link as this guy? If we fast forward to the ending credits of Majora's Mask, we see Skull Kid approaching closer to Link and saying that Link has the same smell as the fairy kid who taught him that song in the woods, presumably Soraya's song. So let's go back to the Ocarina of Time, specifically in the Lost Woods, where Link plays Soraya's song, and after Link plays the song, the Skull Kid tells Link, "You know Soraya's song," and tells Link that they should be friends. After Link teaches Skull Kid Soraya's song, Skull Kid talks about his face being plain. And if we fast forward a bit to when we obtain the Skull Mask, when we approach Skull Kid again wearing that mask, he says that his buddies really want this mask, and he thinks that the mask will make him look tougher. He recognizes Link again, and says, "Aren't you the Kakiri kid?" when Link has the mask on. Skull Kid then walks down from the platform, getting closer to Link. This is probably where he had an opportunity to smell Link and know Link's scent. Thus, all of these events make it very likely that the Skull Kid from Majora's Mask is the same Skull Kid from Ocarina of Time.
Thus, even though Termina is a parallel world, it is not surprising that at least some of the characters, like Link, the Happy Mask Salesman, and Skull Kid, knew about traveling from Hyrule to Termina. Surprisingly, there's another mysterious character from Majora's Mask who appears to know about a place that exists in the parallel world of Hyrule.
Specifically, the Goron in Mountain Village appears to refer to the Dodongo's cavern in Ocarina of Time, when he refers to the rock sirloin that Goron Link retrieved for him as the Dodongo Cavern's finest quality rock sirloin. But how would he know about the Dodongo's cavern, located near the base of Death Mountain from Ocarina of Time, considering Termina is a parallel world? A close examination makes it clear that this reference is in fact a reference to the Dodongo's cavern from Ocarina of Time, specifically in Goron City, which is located in Death Mountain in Ocarina of Time. The Goron near the entrance says that the most delicious and nutritious rocks around are found in the Dodongo's cavern, and that he wants to eat the top sirloin rocks from the Dodongo's cavern. Tellingly, both this Goron from Goron City in Ocarina of Time and the Goron from Mountain Village in Majora's Mask talk about the rocks from the Dodongo's cavern in glowing terms, using phrases such as top sirloin rock and finest quality rock sirloin to describe the rocks found there. In addition, although it is true that in Majora's Mask there is a hidden hole near the entrance to Snowhead where there are two Dodongos roaming around, there does not appear to be any rocks there, so that location doesn't appear to be the place of reference. Thus, it is safe to conclude that the Goron from Mountain Village in Majora's Mask is indeed referring to the Dodongo's cavern, which is located in Death Mountain in the land of Hyrule in Ocarina of Time. Thus, despite being parallel worlds, some of the inhabitants from Termina, in this case, the Goron from Mountain Village, know about Hyrule, which isn't too surprising. After all, let's not forget that there was a secret passageway from Goron City to the Lost Woods, so it's possible that a Goron from Goron City would have used the secret passageway to enter the Lost Woods, and once in the Lost Woods, stumbled across to Termina. In fact, if we look at Termina, specifically Clock Town and the Clock Tower, which appears to be the place which acts as a portal to the Hyrulean Lost Woods, there are two Gorons situated fairly nearby, with one of them being in the bomb shop and the other one who appears to be traveling and who is staying at the Stockpot Inn. Now, it's likely that the route a Goron would take, as well as the route Skull Kid or the Happy Mask Salesman would take, may be different than the path Link took to reach Termina, considering that the only way Link was able to pass through the Twisted Corridor was by first being a Deku Scrub and using the power of the Deku Scrub to traverse on and off the Deku Flowers in the final room prior to entering the Twisted Corridor. This is especially the case with Skull Kid, as we know that he knew about Termina for some time, since he was friends with the Giants even before they created the four worlds in Termina. However, there's more evidence that shows that the inhabitants of Termina are at least somewhat familiar with the land of Hyrule. Let's not forget about the eastern region of Termina, where the statues leading up to Icona Valley appear to have the Triforce symbol on them, which would indicate that at least the architects of those statues must have known about Hyrule, as the Triforce is no doubt a reference to Hyrule and the three golden goddesses. In addition, inside the stone tower, where one must manipulate a series of blocks, these blocks have under them the Triforce symbol, which is likely placed in the bottom of the blocks to disrespect the Triforce. Interestingly enough, in the 3DS version of Majora's Mask, the statues leading up to Icana Valley appear to have only one triangle, instead of the Triforce, i.e. the three triangles inside the big triangle. More telling, this one triangle is upside down. As we can see, immediately above the upside down triangle, there appears to be some kind of a castle-looking structure, perhaps the ancient castle of Icana, and above that appears to be a drawing of Igos du Icana of the Icana royal family. Now, what does this all mean? I conclude that this is indeed a reference to Hyrule in a condescending way, because not only is the triangle upside down, but directly above it is Igos du Icana, the king of Icana Castle. This isn't surprising, as the blocks inside Stone Tower, which we just covered, were also done in a taunting way to the Hyruleans, and perhaps more specifically to the three goddesses. Now, I do believe that the one triangle, which is upside down, found on the statues represents Hyrule, or at least is a reference to Hyrule, the goddesses, or the sacred triangles. Here's why. When we are in the graveyard in Ocarina of Time, and we enter the tomb, we see the royal family's tomb, that is. We see single triangles in the room with the Redeads, and we also see the single triangles standing upright in the room where we actually learn the Sun Song. In fact, in that room, in addition to the single triangles that we see on the walls, we see the Triforce symbol near the wall where we must play the Ocarina of Time. Thus, given that we see these individual triangles alongside the main Triforce symbol in the room where we learn the Sun Song, it is my conclusion that these individual triangles are likely just another way of referencing the Triforce symbol, as the Triforce symbol essentially contains three triangles within one larger triangle. Thus, contrary to what some may have theorized, the change to the statues on the road from Termina to Icana Canyon in the 3DS version of Majora's Mask, where the Triforce symbol was replaced with one individual triangle, does not alter the lore contained in the N64 version of Majora's Mask, as both relate to the Triforce. All of this clearly shows that the Terminians, and more specifically, the people who built a lot of the structures, especially in the eastern region of Termina, presumably members of the Icana royal family or their underlings, not only had knowledge about their Hyrulean counterparts, but openly mocked and taunted them. In conclusion, Hyrule and Termina are parallel worlds, where the inhabitants, with the exception of the Happy Mask Salesman and Skull Kid, are indeed different people. In addition, it appears that at least some inhabitants of Termina not only had knowledge of their Hyrulean counterparts, but also did not hold them in high regard. I thank you guys for watching this, and please don't forget to hit the like button, share with family and friends, and subscribe to our channel, Gagz Gaming, for many more great theories to come. Also, please leave your comments about what you think about this theory and what your theories are.